Your point is interesting, Majid. We have a president here who is going to Saudi Arabia, but is sticking by the Iranian nuclear deal, for example, even though he said it was the worst deal ever in office. He's going to Israel, one of the closest allies, having allegedly blown Israeli intelligence in an Oval Office meeting with the Russians. Surely there's some worry about close allies, from whether it be Riyadh, Qatar, or others.
Do you mean that the other countries like Qatar will be concerned?
Yeah, well, anyway, if you're a traditional ally of the United States, will you trust this president with information and create a bond where you trust each other going forward?
Well, now it's at the level of words and meetings, and then I think it goes into the next steps and whether they're going to transform these words into actions. But I see what you're mentioning. But America has done it for a long time. They pursue different policies when it comes to different countries in the region. There might be a rival with the country, but at the same time they might be selling products to that country. So I don't think it has to be a very harmonious policy. You could see different policies conducted at the same time. But but yes, some countries in the region, absolutely, they're going to see this visit as a threat, particularly countries like Iran, when it sees that President Trump choosing Saudi Arabia, Iran's major rival in the region, as a country to visit. So this can create, again, might create tensions in the region. But I think what we need is a comprehensive and articulate policy towards the Middle East that will encompass the Syrian conflict, the Iraqi conflict, and all the players in the region and in the international arena. I think if we just focus on one country, then we're losing the whole picture.
Okay, well, we'll hope something comes out of that. We have to turn to Trump's domestic woes at the moment, because they are many. I've lost count of the number of investigations, the number of scoops, and I normally remember these things. I don't normally write them down, but this week I've been scribbling furiously. There seems to be scoop after scoop. Now, a lot of these are allegations, and we can't just say whatever the New York Times or the Washington Post or other ones publishes is true, especially with anonymous sources. But James, what's your overall view of where this White House is, considering the problems they're having with the FBI investigation, now a special counsel? This is really unlike any other presidency, isn't it?
It is, and I think this is a resistance, if you will, that started the day after the election. Remember, a lot of the people that were served under the Obama administration, both career and appointees, are still in place. They have not been replaced by political appointees, and indeed, and many of the Republicans appointed are not Trump loyalists, but rather the reason this is important is because we have two stories going on. One is the narrative about Russian interference in our election, for which there are many investigations and not one bit of evidence of an actual crime occurring. We do know we have multiple crimes occurring of leaks of classified information to fuel this campaign from what people are calling the deep state, in league with the Democrats, the media, and many of the Republicans, to remove whom they regard as an illegitimate president. And now when we talk about changing U.S. policy, people are reassured he's following down the road that he talked about. That means more enmity with the Russians, more nation building, more wars in the Middle East, more trillions of dollars down the drain. That's what he promised to get away from, and I think there's an establishment that doesn't want him to be able to do it.
James, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is a feeling amongst many Trump supporters, not just here in Washington, but around the country as well. Atiba, respond to that, because that's not the view from inside the Beltway. That's not the view of people who watch cable news. This seems to be a presidency that is in real trouble just 120 days in, if you compare it to similar scandals. The word Watergate has been mentioned. The word impeachment is coming up. We have this special counsel in the form Robert Mueller, who's the former head of the FBI. This is serious, right?
It's serious and has serious implications for the American people. Has serious implications for Trump voters. I mean, he made a lot of promises that he's not keeping to those voters. But I'm wondering about this comment about there being political appointees still working within the federal government, because the political appointee friends that I have, they're no longer working in the government.
Good.
They're not there, and so this is
Let's not get personal.
This whole swamp thing right now this is all a byproduct of what Trump has created. The president is saying one thing, and his administration, his communication staff is constantly in flux, trying to catch up and keep up with what the president is saying. So all the issues that he has right now, these are all self-inflicted wounds that he's created himself.
I'm going to play you a bit of sound of guess who, Donald Trump, because he really has come out swinging, despite the fact that there are lots of fingers pointing at him. Let's just have a listen to his press conference earlier this week.
I think it's totally ridiculous. Everybody thinks so. And again, we have to get back to working our country properly so that we can take care of the problems that we have. We have plenty of problems. We've done a fantastic job. We have a tremendous group of people, millions and millions of people out there that are looking at what you had just said and said, what are they doing?
James, is that true? Are millions of people impressed with what he's doing? Because we just got opinion polls out again, the lowest approval rating of any new president, somewhere in the mid-30%.
Yeah, and I would say that itself is rather phenomenal, given the full-scale assault that goes on day in and day out on all the prestige media. And I think this is largely why we have a very divided country. We've already had a divided country for many years, where you have people largely in the cities, largely on the coast, and the so-called flyover country, the deplorables, who just are living in a different mental and moral universe, that we are not one nation anymore in a real sense, I would say.
Prestige media, not mainstream media anymore. Sorry, you wanted to say something?
I was going to say, I mean, we're 50 states, so we have 50 different states in mind. But, you know, to say that the president hasn't brought this all on himself and that this is all a result of what the media is doing, the media is the one that was kicked out of the White House during the meeting with Russia and just a few weeks ago. I mean,
yeah, but that's okay. Their friends inside the intelligence community leaked the documents to them anyway, so they don't have to be in the meeting.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I like the back and forth, but there is also one more point here, is that the leaks are, a lot of them are Trump officials within the White House unhappy with what the president's doing, right?
That's part of his problem. I think he has people he has appointed to office who do not share his policy goals and simply are not loyal to him.
Who are you talking about?
I don't know. We need to find out. And look, if Jeff Sessions were doing his job, there would be a secret grand jury impaneled, and we should be seeing indictments soon. I don't have any evidence that he's doing that.
But why so quickly after he was elected president? Why is all this? Why, you know, I like the saying, if you want to get out of a hole, stop digging. He keeps digging. I mean, he keeps digging
tweeting.
and
He
digging.
keeps
He keeps
tweeting.
tweeting. There you go. There you go.
That because I think he is resisting doing what you said people approved he would do. If he would just act like a normal Republican, which means essentially the same as a Democrat, people would be happy with him inside the Beltway. That's not what he promised to do. So he struggles against that, and they say, this guy's just making more trouble for himself.
But essentially, it feels like he's not president for the whole country. It feels like he's president for the 62 million people that have voted for him. He's not talking to the rest of the country. He's not addressing a lot of other concerns that are going on.
I think we have to face the fact that Obama was the same way. He was the president for the people who voted for him, and the people who didn't vote for him didn't like him.
And Washington is still divided, and the problem is that a lot of legislation gets gummed up, and it looks like Washington and the White House are paralyzed, which is exactly what the American people always complain about this town. Tara, can I just bring you in here? You read the foreign newspapers, I do too. You know, the world is just looking at America with their mouth open right now. How's this affecting America's image abroad, and obviously, you know, Trump's trip?
I think looking back at November, everybody around the world, at least a lot of leaders, a lot of people who are interested in the United States policies toward their countries were very surprised. And I think with every single day that passes, with every single news, with every single so-called scandal that comes out of the White House, this image and this vision and this view gets more disrupted and disillusioned. Now, a lot of people, a lot of countries in particular, are taking advantage of this. A lot of countries are very keen to see what's next, what's going to happen to the Trump administration. But I think what's very interesting to point out to you, what happened the past couple of days was the French election. The fact that people around the world, not necessarily French people, came together and were so much in support of Macron's win. That was very telling, that we don't want a world that is moving towards this isolation, this populism, this leadership of zero substance that they perhaps have seen with Trump's election.
Tara?
That was very telling. So the world is watching, and we're just a few days, or a few months in, and we have a lot to deal with at home.
I'm glad you mentioned the French elections, because I want to talk about another election, and that's the Iranian election, which, as we speak, is coming to a conclusion, the presidential election. Majid, obviously this has been a runoff between the sitting president Rouhani and Ibrahim Raisi. This is a big stakes election too. What do you think has been the major point that the global audience should learn in terms of this process?
Well, there are several issues. I think one, you have Rouhani, called from the moderate party, who calls for more rapprochement with the West and more economic liberalization. And then you have Ibrahim Raisi, who is favored by the IRGC and this seems the supreme leader, and he's a hardliner, and he believes that you should take insular approach, and you don't need the West in order to resolve the economic issues. So the polls shows that Rouhani now is ahead of Raisi, and a lot of majority of people in the middle class neighborhoods seems to be in favor of him. But I think what the world should look at is if whether Rouhani or Ebrahimi will be elected, which we know tomorrow, and whether the IRGC and Khamenei will have the same role after the election, or there will be contradictions between the new president and the hardliners.
Tara, I just want to go back to you. Obviously, the Iran nuclear deal, first election since then, that was on the mind of the voters, but also the economic benefits that were meant to come along with it haven't arrived yet or haven't been delivered. So there's a lot more work to be done, right?
Absolutely. And I want to compare that to the United States politics. Let's take a look back 8 years ago when President Obama inherited the economy from the Bush administration. If you think about the arguments that were made at the time was, you know, we inherited an economy that was not working, right? And that's the argument that the Rouhani administration has been making in justifying the very little progress that they've made since their win in 2013, but also since the 2015 nuclear accord. Now, he inherited a broken economy from the Ahmadinejad era, and now it's up to 26% growth. But is that enough? No. Iran is a country of 80 million that is predominantly based on an oil and gas-based economy. Now, they have to diversify from that economy, and much of that depends on engagement with the world. But one thing I want to add is that the supreme leader is no shy person, or not anyone who won't chime in, whether it's with the moderates or the hardliners. He's very, very well aware of what's going on, and he's very well aware of Rouhani's popularity. So it doesn't mean that if he wins tomorrow, he's going to ultimately clash with this president. I think he's at an age that maybe he wants to leave the regime, leave the revolution in a stable place, because of what we saw in 2009, or what we saw with the uprising of a lot of voices inside Iran, is that we're not going to tolerate a hardline narrative. So
thank you.
We have to see what's going to happen.
Tara in New York, thank you so much. That's all we have time for. So from New York, from Los Angeles, and also here in Washington, D.C., I want to thank our panel.